Hired, a 3-step process to land your first part 1 job. So this video is going to be split into 3 parts. The first part, where to find a job. The second part, how to apply. And the final part, how to ace the interview. Okay, so let's start with where to find a job and job sites. There's 4 key places that I'd suggest looking for a job. The first one is Design Jobs. So this is like an architecture magazine. The next best place to look for a job is somewhere like RIBA Jobs. Another great job site is LinkedIn. You've probably heard of this, and it's kind of like a social media but like professional life. Start looking at setting up your profile now. I think that brings me on to when's best to apply for a job. As a rough guide, you want to be looking in the summer months. I wouldn't push it much past September, but I also wouldn't go before like May or June, because you really want to be focusing in on your 3rd year or your final year at uni. And at least for me, I think that's more important than getting a part 1 job, because your grades from university really will stick with you for life. Anyway, getting back to it. Another place where you can find job adverts is Indeed. Okay. The next best place to find a job would be direct on their website or on Instagram. Here's a snippet of an Instagram page for Howard Tompkins, and if you look at their most recent post, it was actually advertising for a part 1 job. And so definitely keep an eye on social media. Some of the smaller and medium-sized practices may not have the budget to be advertising on things like Design Jobs or RIBA Jobs, but it's likely that their social media will keep you up to date. What if you know the company that you want to apply for, but there's no actual job advert? Well, you can do a speculative application. This just means you basically send them off an email or a letter, and you basically say oh, I'm here with my skills, would you like to hire me? But how do we do that? Here's a copy of an email that I wrote to a job speculatively, and it did get me the opportunity to have an interview with them. You really want to be concise and specific with this email. Really show them why you're a great fit for this company. You can pull out some of your most noticeable accomplishments or awards if you have any of those things, but it's really about being specific as to why your skills will fit this company. I think now we're in an age where we can print things off again. We're sort of post-COVID, post-pandemic. It might also be a nice idea to print off a portfolio and hand deliver it to the practice that you're looking to approach, because sometimes, even though they may not be hiring on that specific week, they might keep that portfolio in the office, and then when they are looking for a part 1 role in the future, you'll be right there to hand. Okay, section 2, how to apply. And we're going to start here with some company research. I started this process off by rating all the job adverts that I saw out of 5 stars, and if I didn't rate the job a 4 or a 5 star, then I didn't even bother to send in an application. And I think this is really important, because you can be really overwhelmed when you're looking for your first job, but you've got to make sure that it's somewhere that you're going to be happy to work, and also somewhere that suits you, because at the end of the day, that means the employer's going to be happy and you're going to be happy. Other things to research is to look at recent projects that they've done, look at how they work, and if that working style matches your own. Do they do lots of hand modelling, hand sketching? Do they work in CAD? Any of those things. If you've got skills in those areas, or if that interests you, then that's a good place to be sending an application to. Also, it's great to be thinking, what can you add to the company? Is there anything that they're missing that you have skills in that you can be of benefit to them as a practice? And finally, it's essential that you can find the name of somebody to address your emails and your cover letters to. If it's not really obvious from the application, maybe just a quick phone call to the practice itself and just saying, hi, I'm a part 1, I'm looking to apply for this job. Can you just let me know who's going to be looking after the hiring process? Now, I'm going to be looking at CVs, cover letters, and portfolios. So I'm going to start with a CV. Here's a copy of mine. And I think something that's important here is that it's well presented. Architecture is such a visual course. It's important that you can display something which is quite text heavy in a graphical way. The short of it is, if it doesn't look good, they're not going to read it. You want to make sure that your name and your contact details are really obvious and right at the start. And then a couple of headings, which I use for mine, include education, work experience, any awards or any like press things that you've been involved in, and also maybe round off of certain skills. Don't overestimate your skill set here. Nobody's going to be an expert in CAD or in Photoshop after an undergrad degree. Just say that you have experience using it. And the final thing here is to put on references on your CV. It's always just good practice if you're looking for a reference from one of your tutors or from maybe your boss at a part-time job. Just give them a heads up. Good, like 2 or 3 weeks is always helpful. I think something that's important to include on your CV is work experience. That's not necessarily architecture. So have you, like me, been a waitress for like a few years? If so, think about the skills that that job has given you that are actually going to be relevant to being a Part 1 architect. You know, can you engage with the public in a positive manner? Are you able to think on your feet and problem solve? Any of those skills really are important and just show that you are a good person and that you can handle the complexities of a job. Okay, the next step is a cover letter. I'm going to be honest with you here. When I sent out my first few applications, I thought the cover letter was the email that you sort of send your application with. This is not the case. You need a separate email to send to the employer when you're sending your whole application. Something as simple as like, hi, name, I recently saw an advert on, LinkedIn for this job. I think I'd be a great candidate. I've attached my CV, portfolio, cover letter here. I think you'd particularly be interested in this piece in my portfolio because it links to that job on your website. Hope to hear from you soon. Best, Jenny, contact details, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so the cover letter itself is a separate document. Again, this should be well presented. And here's a couple of things that I included in mine. I made sure it was very specific to the company that you're applying to. Maybe you have a base template, but I think it's really beneficial if you can write this every single time that you're applying to a new job. You want to pull out projects from the architecture practice which have inspired you or which you can link to work that you've done yourself. Name drop those projects, show that you've done a bit of background research. Are there any modules that you've done at university which link to the way that they're working? I also think it's important in the cover letter to look at the bullet point which are in the job description and kind of use those exact phrases and say that you have those skills, or find examples of those skills which you have. I also think it's really nice, a nice finishing touch, just to add a handwritten signature at the bottom of your portfolio. Okay, step number 3. What the hell is a job portfolio? I want to just give a bit of a caveat before I start delving into this portfolio in a bit more detail. I am no expert in this area. I think what's most important is that your portfolio reflects you and your style. This is just what I did, and as I say, I don't really have any qualifications in this. I'm just a Part 1 like you soon hopefully will be. But yeah, the way that I structured my CV, cover letter and portfolio did get me a number of interviews, and it did get me a number of job offers, so hopefully this is helpful. Where I started for looking for advice for my portfolio is on the RIBA website. So I'll leave a link in the description below. They have advice for Part 1 graduates who are looking to make their first portfolio for a job application. So I kind of followed the tips for this. And their first tip was to include a mini timeline or sort of CV. Personally, I'm not sure if this is essential, but I did it anyway. So I split this off into high school and then university grades and sort of pulled out the key bits of information there. But I think what's also nice to include in these CVs are those personable hobbies or skills that you have which aren't necessarily architecture. So for me, I included things like, I joined the architecture netball team and I ran my first half marathon. And then I also showed a bit of development in those skills. So between second year and third year, I'd gone from running my first half marathon to my 5th half marathon. And I think it just shows that, you're a well-rounded person, but also that you're consistently growing. At the end of the day, they're hiring a person, they're not hiring a qualification. First impressions really do count. You want to make sure that the front cover of your portfolio pops. I used just like a full bleed image here. I don't know, it was the best image that I had from my project. I think it's also important on the front cover to have your name and some contact details, just so that if somebody sees it, you know, it's really easy for them to contact you. I think it's also helpful if that's also on the reverse, you know, on the back cover, just in case it is a printed document, because then, you know, it's always super easy to contact you. Again, it's that forethought. You're thinking about, if you were the employer, how do you make it as easy as possible for them to invite you to interview or for them to offer you the job? Next thing that I think is really important is to have a short introduction whenever you introduce a new project. So you just want a title, maybe a date to say when you did this project. If it was a group project, highlight the names of any other team members within that group, and then 2 or 3 line summary of what that project is. I also think it's great in a portfolio to show a range of skills. So I think it's more important to show this than it is to show like 10 beautifully done renders. This is because if you only show something like 10 renders, they may just like typecast you, which is like where they go, oh, okay, cool, you do loads of renders, we will hire you to just do our renders. If you are looking for that full rounded experience at part 1, I'd recommend putting in like, you know, a few renders, a technical section, some orthographic drawings. Be selective and be concise in what you include, but make sure it shows a range of your skills. People always ask, like, how many pages should a portfolio be? Again, this is sort of up to you, but I think a good rule of thumb is 5 to 20 pages. Part 3, how to ace the interview so that they say, you're hired. Don't worry, no, it's not Alan Sugar, they won't be doing that. Okay, so pre-interview, what do you do? I think it's really important to get down a little bit more research on the company. You want to be able to like name drop 3 of their projects and, you know, talk a little bit about those projects. I also think it's important to understand the company's values and how they work. Think about here how you can fit in, but also how you can add to that company. Okay, so I'm gonna let you in on a little secret here. I made a presentation before every job interview, and every time I made this presentation, I was offered a job. So hopefully that means it was some sort of good thing to do. And I'm gonna tell you the details of how to do that. The very first slide is where you're making that first impression again. Be professional here, but also have a bit of fun. Include the company logo and the company name, and then just the basics like what's your name, who are the people interviewing you. It's always good to have their name here, because if you're a bit nervous before the interview, you can sort of look at it and then be like, oh, Mark, oh, Alex, hi, great to meet you. Then on the following slides, what I did is on the left-hand side of the page, found an image of one of their projects from the website, pulled out a couple of key bullet points about that project, and then I highlighted one of those points which related to like my own working style. I think it's also nice to note here, I also included a couple of photos of me when I went on a cycle and I saw this building and I just so happened to take a photo. You know, don't be scared to show a little bit of personality in the interview. As I say, they're hiring the person as much as they're hiring your work. Another example from this Maver interview, again putting down a few bullet points from this project, the one that I really focused on, hand sketching and reflecting. So I have an image of a hand sketch from their website, from this project, and then right next to it, I should put a hand sketch from one of my projects with the same sort of reflective annotations. And I think this just shows that you really can fit into their working environment and that you understand what's required of you when you're in the job. And I also think it makes you stand out. It's a little bit unique, you know. I don't think a lot of people are gonna have this. Cool, so this then brings us on to what to expect in the interview itself. For me, this was the basic process. Started off with basic introductions, like names, all of that jazz. And then it went on to the company sort of talking about themselves, talking about their projects and sort of trying to sell themselves to you. It's a good chance here to just take a breath and relax and listen and make notes. Then your time to shine. Then they normally ask you to share your portfolio or, in our case, our presentation. So they might say, oh, have you got a portfolio to hand? And what I replied with is, oh, I do have my portfolio, but I've actually made a presentation. It's about 5 slides, so it should take around 5 minutes. Is that okay if I show you this? And honestly, 9 times out of 10, they're gonna say yes. So you share that presentation, you talk through your skills, you like open up a conversation about your work, end the interview with some questions. Definitely come prepared with a few questions that you want to ask. Maybe some good examples of this is like, oh, what sort of projects can I expect to be working on? What stages can I expect to be working on? You might want to ask, what does a basic week look like? Will I be able to get any experience on site? Those sort of relevant questions which you're genuinely interested in. Anyway, this was a whistle-stop tour on how to get hired for your very first Part 1 job. I hope this at least gave you a bit of an insight into the whole process. I know when I graduated, I was totally confused by it all. I kind of didn't feel very prepared for my first time job hunting. It felt very scary, and it felt like, you know, I don't know, I just remember feeling quite lost, and it can be quite hard if you apply to a number of jobs and don't hear back, or, you know, do get rejected from one of your dream jobs. Don't worry, it's okay. These things take time, they take practice, and everybody's going through the same thing. Just keep on believing in yourself, keep on changing up your portfolio and learning from, you know, interviews, learn from the process. There's always an opportunity in the future to, you know, be hired elsewhere, and I think that's really important to remember. I think it's also important to remember that if you are offered a job, you don't necessarily have to say yes. You can turn it down. I phoned them up and said, hi, I'm really sorry, thank you for the offer, but I would not like to take this job. You know, I left on good terms, which probably means if I applied in the future and I was, you know, the right fit for the job, I don't think saying no to them at Part 1 would impact my chances in the future. If any of you have any specific questions, do pop them down below and I will try and get back to you. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have found it helpful, please do give it a like. It makes a really big difference, and if every single one of you who has got to this stage leaves a like, I think that will enable this video to be shared to others so that more people are in a, you know, informed position when it comes to finding a job. I'd love this to be a community of architects all figuring out, you know, life and jobs and studying together. So please do leave a like if you can to make that happen. And on that, I'll catch you in the next one. Bye guys!